gentlemen, would you welcome Miss Ingrid Bergman? I suppose we might as well start at the beginning. I was surprised, though I shouldn't have been, reading your book, to realize that you made as many as 8 or 9 films in Sweden before you actually made one film in America. You also made one film in Germany. Would you tell us something about how that came about?
Well, I wanted to be an actress, and I was very set on the theatre. So I came into dramatic school, and after the first year we had 3 months summer vacation, and I just wanted to work, and I thought I'd go out and look in the film studio if there was any work, and they accepted to listen to me and made a test of me, and I got a job. And it was only meant to be for the summer. Then I wanted to go back to school and continue my serious studies to become a stage actress, because I really looked down upon the movies. I didn't think that was not difficult. What was difficult was to be on the stage. And then, of course, when I started to make a movie, I realized how interesting it was, how wonderful it was. These close-ups and all the nuances in your face and your eyes, how much more you could see than you could see on the stage. So when my directors and producers out there in the film studio in Stockholm asked me to stay, I decided that maybe that was a good idea. I still had the stage in mind. I thought maybe I can do a shortcut. I can do a couple of movies, and then it'll be easier for me to get on the stage, you see. Then I would make a little name for myself in the movies. And I stayed on and on and on.
Were you at this time very conscious of American films, or would you have seen primarily Swedish films as well as appearing in them?
No, we were very much aware of American movies, and I mean they were all over flooded the market. But our movies in Sweden were so simple. They were so, we didn't have the money to make those big productions, and we didn't have the possibilities of building such big sets and things like that. It was very modest. But it was the same way of doing it, except instead of having 60 people on the set with specialists in every kind of job, we had about 15, and they did everything.
How did you get your first glimpse of Hollywood? Were you under contract before you went there, or did you go out for tests and all the rest of it?
No, in those days, Hollywood was looking for talent in Europe, and they took anybody that was anybody. They took whatever they could grab from France, from England, from Poland, and also from Sweden and Norway. And I read about them and saw the result of the 7 years contract, because everybody had a 7-year contract. That meant that you came over with a big publicity campaign, this big star from, let's say, France, and she'd come over, they'd change her hair, change her face, cap her teeth, and pluck her eyebrows, and then she looked like everybody else in Hollywood. And, and then she would have one part, and 6 months later she was back home. And you said, what happened to the 7-year contract? Well, it was a contract for the producer. You see, what he could say, I want you for another 6 months, another 6 months. But if he didn't want you for another 6 months, they just said, go home. And so I said, that is a lesson to me. I'm not going to do that. I want to find one studio that is interested in me, and in the studio that wants to make one movie, and then we'll decide if I should stay or not. I wanted it to be up to me. I don't know how come I had so much courage, because I really wanted to go to Hollywood. I was very fascinated by it. Who wasn't in those days? Still, people are. But then, you see, all these big studios were after me, and always coming with a 7-year contract. And I said, no, no, no. And one day, David Selznick sent a woman, Catherine Brown, over to Sweden to see me. He had seen the picture Intermezzo. In England it was called Escape to Happiness. And that was a Swedish movie. And he'd seen that, and he wanted to buy the rights of the movie and also buy me. And she came over because I'd said no to him too, because he also came with a 7-year contract. And when she came back to Sweden to talk to me, after having all these difficulties of no and no and no, she said, what is it you want? And I said, it's fine if you do Intermezzo, but only that. I don't want the 7 years after, just one movie, and then we'll see how we get along, if you like me and if I like you, and then we can always make other movies, but I don't want to be tied in case I don't like it in Hollywood. And he accepted it. So that's how I came over. There was no test or anything. And then the one promise I had to make was that in case I liked it in Hollywood, I shouldn't go to another studio and sign up for a couple of years. I should stay with David Selznick. Now, I happen to have found the very best producer that there was. I mean, I was so happy to work for him because he was very conscientious and very intelligent and very artistic in every way. So it was a wonderful thing to have him as the boss. So therefore I stayed on with him and came back to America, and we made a contract for 4 years, and then I was independent the rest of my career.
We must end it. We've got to stop seeing each other.
I see. We just say goodbye, never see each other again. It's very simple, isn't it?
We must. We can't go on lying to ourselves and to people who trust us. It's impossible, unbearable.
You're right.
Now, one thing that's always intrigued me is that I think the question of language is very important. The reason that many of these French and Italian stars that you were mentioning didn't really work out in Hollywood was because, however good technically their command of English was, they were never at home in it. How did you learn English? Did you find it a great problem acting in English to begin with?
Yes, of course I did. I spoke very, very poor English. And then I studied, after K. Brown had been there and we had decided on this contract, I started to really work on it. And I got a British teacher.
How many languages have you actually acted in? I know English, Swedish, French, I suppose German. Did you ever act in Italian?
Oh, sure, yes.
I mean, I know you made a number of Italian films, but
yes.
It doesn't necessarily follow, as we know, just because you make films in Italy, that you speak Italian.
I worked in 5 languages, and I think that I am a rare bird, because I know many that act in 3 languages, but somehow, when you're born in a country like Sweden, which is far away, and you know that Swedish is, if you live there, you just have to learn some other languages if you want to get around in Europe.
Now, to come back to your early days in Hollywood, you started making a couple of films with Gregory Ratoff, a director who certainly had all the mannerisms of genius, if perhaps not, unfortunately, the genius of genius. But then you very rapidly went on to work with some of the biggest and most important names in Hollywood at that time, people like Victor Fleming, George Cukor, and of course especially Alfred Hitchcock, with whom you made 3 films and of whom you're obviously one of the favorite stars. I wonder if you'd like to tell us something about how you responded to the various directors.
Well, some were easier than others to work with. I mean, there was a certain contact with some directors that you find, and there are certain times the wall. But a standard question is always, who is your favorite leading man and who is your favorite director? And I couldn't tell, because the directors were all so different. You cannot compare Jean Renoir with George Cukor, nor George Cukor with Hitchcock, nor with Ingmar Bergman. They all had different ways of getting what they wanted out of the actors. And the same thing with my leading men. They were all top actors and wonderful, handsome men. I don't want to choose just one of them as my favorite.
The first film you made with Hitchcock was Spellbound, which was, of course, also produced by Selznick. And I was reading Selznick's memos recently, and in this he remarks somewhere, he left Hitchcock to shoot it just the way he wanted, but provided he had the last say in the editing, and he said that he had taken, I think it was 25 minutes out of the film in the editing, and Hitch had agreed that this was right, and so on. This rather surprised me. I wonder, do you remember now what was actually removed?
I don't remember. I don't know what was cut. I know that the dream sequence was cut, and I thought that was a great pity, because after all, it was Salvador Dali who had designed it. And I mean, today, to have a long dream sequence designed by Salvador Dali would be, you know, the whole movie would be worth seeing just for that. And for some strange reason, they cut that in half.
Did you see much of Dali when the film was being made?
He was there, and he was very intrigued by it. I mean, I don't think he had ever made a movie before, and he thought it was wonderful for his talent to work with moving pictures instead of still pictures.
Well, does it make any sense to you what I dreamed?
Not yet. You were trying to tell yourself something. What it is, we'll figure out later.
There's a lot more to it.
Go on and try to recall the details.
The more cockeyed, the better for the scientific side of it.
He was leaning over the sloping roof of a high building. It was the man with the beard. I yelled at him to watch out. Then he went over, slowly, with his feet in the air. And then I saw the proprietor again, the man in the mask. He was hiding behind a tall chimney, and he had a small wheel in his hand. I saw him drop the wheel on the roof. Suddenly, I was running. Then I heard something beating over my head. It was a great pair of wings. The wings chased me and almost caught up with me when I came to the bottom of the hill. I must have escaped. I don't remember.
Now, George Cukor must have been a very different director to work with, though, oddly enough, the subject of Gaslight, the film that you made with him, could almost be a Hitchcock subject. How did you find working with George, who, after all, though he will kill anybody who says it, is most famous as a woman's director?
Yes, he was very good. He was excellent. He gave you wonderful little details, and he knew how women reacted. I mean, he had a very he was very. He had many women friends, and he observed them, and he knew, and he talked so much to women. He got everything out of them, and then he would give you ideas from what he had found in other women, I think, and he was absolutely wonderful to work for.
During that time, towards the end of the war, you made one of the films which obviously is one of your best known, though I gather that you're not anymore that fond of it, perhaps because it's been too much talked about. I'm referring, of course, to Casablanca. Now, that is a film which has become, obviously, a myth. I'm not sure whether it's become a classic of cinema exactly, but it's certainly become a myth. Were any of you conscious, while you were making it, that it was going to achieve anything like that special flavor and status, or did it just seem like another Warner Brothers movie, and did it all take you by surprise?
It seemed like a very bad Warner Brothers movie. We had a very poor script, and they had all these fine actors there. You know, every little part is played by a very good actor, like Peter Lorre and Sidney Greenstreet. They were all very fine, and Claude Rains and Humphrey Bogart, naturally. So they were all very upset, because here they were, and they never knew what they were going to do the following day. We never knew how to end the movie, which was a big worry to me, because I didn't know which man I was really in love with. I asked them, do I love my husband or do I love Humphrey Bogart? Because Paul Henry played my husband. And they said, we don't know. We haven't made up our minds yet. Play it in between. So, very often when I see that movie, I can see my face and it has no expression whatsoever. Because I didn't dare. I didn't know what to do.
Can I tell you a story, Rick?
You got a wow finish?
I don't know the finish yet.
Well, go on, tell it. Maybe one will come to you as you go along.
It's about a girl who had just come to Paris from her home in Oslo. At the house of some friends, she met a man about whom she had heard her whole life. A very great and courageous man. He opened up for her a whole beautiful world full of knowledge and thoughts and ideals. Everything she knew or ever became was because of him. And she looked up to him and worshipped him with the feeling she supposed was love.
Yes, it's very pretty. I heard a story once. As a matter of fact, I've heard a lot of stories in my time. They went along with the sound of a tinny piano playing in the parlor downstairs. Mister, I met a man once when I was a kid. It always begins. Well, I guess neither one of our stories is very funny. Tell me, who was it you left me for? Was it Laszlo, or were there others in between? Or aren't you the kind that tells?
After the war, of course, you began the Italian phase of your life, which must have been rather unexpected to you, since obviously, to begin with, you went just with the idea of making one film, Stromboli. What was it about filmmaking in Europe at this point which attracted your interest and attention?
Well, when I saw Rome Open City, you see, it was so different from anything I'd ever seen. All the American pictures, as you know, at that time, beautiful, smooth, and everything was perfection. And suddenly, on the screen appeared this stark, naked movie, which was so realistic, it was so true. And it so fascinated me, this new way of making a movie, to make it so real. And I then had 10 years in Hollywood. I've been very fortunate, worked with very good people, and my movies were, most of them, successes, so I had no reason to complain. But I've always had a desire inside of me to change. And when I saw that movie, I said, this is what I want to do. I want to do a real movie like Rossellini's. Then I went home and sat down and wrote a letter and said, I would like to work for you. I thought, well, he'll never ask for me because I'm in Hollywood, and I mean, it would never occur to him that I like to leave Hollywood and come and do little black and white movies in Italy. And he had no idea who I was because he didn't go much to the movies. And also, the war was that I didn't have many movies. But then he remembered he'd gone into a cinema because the bombs were falling all over. And for protection, he'd gone into a cinema. And there they were showing Intermezzo. So then when they reminded him, he remembered who I was. And then he wrote back, and he told me the story of Stromboli. And I accepted it, and that's when I came to Italy, and I stayed on.
Well, yes, history followed suit, as history has a way of doing. But did you feel at the time, and do you feel now, looking back, that Hollywood really ill-treated you over the whole business of your relationship with Rossellini? I mean, what did it take you greatly by surprise, this outburst of Puritan zeal about one of their beloved stars?
Yes. Yes, of course I was hurt. But, well, I didn't think that I had done the right thing. But I didn't think that what I had done was so much other people's business. I thought that you should look upon an actress as an actress. What she does on the screen, on the stage, that's what you pay for, and that's what you get. If you don't like the performance, you can walk out. But to criticize people's private life, I thought was wrong, to such an extent that even a senator in Washington gets up on the floor and, you know, I'm going to be the corruption of American womanhood, and I was a creature of evil, and I don't know, he said, out of Ingrid Bergman's ashes will grow a better Hollywood.
How did you find working with Rossellini over the, I think, 6 films, or 5 and a bit films that you made with him?
Well, it was hard because he didn't use actors if he could avoid them. He wanted real people. He wanted their faces. He didn't want actors who made believe things. He wanted the real. And so he got together in Stromboli all the real people. They were not actors at all. My leading man, for instance, when we were on our way to Stromboli, we were driving down, he stopped at the beach in Salerno and said, sit here a minute in the car, I'll go down and pick up a leading man for you. So I thought he was joking. Then he went down on the beach and he watched all the fishermen. And then he couldn't decide between two of them, so he took both of them. And they thought that they were going to be fishermen, work on, maybe carry things, you know, just work in the crew. And then he came back and said, I picked out 2 boys for you, so now we'll study them when we get to Stromboli and see which one is the more intelligent. It was awfully hard to find one that was taller than you, he said, but one is pretty tall. The other one is smaller, but I think we'll take both of them. Anyway, it was difficult because of the amateurs. You see, they didn't know anything about dialogue, and Roberto made it up as he went along. He was really a man of documentation, documentaries. He was a teacher. He couldn't care less if he was entertaining you. He never made any pictures for entertainment. He wanted to teach. He wrote actually the dialogue just before we shot, or the day before. He had a skeleton. He knew exactly what he wanted. And he knew the story. But the little details like dialogue, he thought that was unnecessary. The image was what he was looking for, the image and the camera. And I always said he wrote with his camera, you see.
What was it?
Oi.
Yes?
Look, ecco.
Our picture in those days, the pictures that we did together, were not successful, not one of them. And today, I'm sure even if you show them here today, the new generation and the people that have grown up with the new advanced cinema, find them all masterpieces.
Jean Renoir was another of the great figures of the cinema that you've worked with. How did you come in contact with him, and how did you enjoy working with him?
I knew him in Hollywood. He was there when I arrived. And Jean and I became very great friends, and I always wanted to make a movie for him. And he said, no, you're too big of a star, he said. I can only work with smaller people. I can't work with the big superstars. So he said, but one day you'll come down, he said, and I'll be there with the net. After the movies, with Roberto, all those movies that in those days were not successful and didn't work out, the relationship was naturally strained through that, and other people came in and wanted to work with me, and Roberto wouldn't let them work. He wouldn't let me work for anybody else, but then Jean Renoir, whom he had great respect for, came, my net, and he said, could I make a picture with Ingrid? And he told the story about Helena and Les Hommes, and that's how I made my first French movie. And from there on, I moved into American movies, back to Anastasia.
Well, of course, the years when you were back in the American cinema produced some of your biggest successes, films like Anastasia, Inn of the Sixth Happiness, and, of course, eventually the film for which you got your latest Oscar, the Murder on the Orient Express. But what I would like to ask you about more is the most extraordinary, I think, of your later films, Autumn Sonata. Now, how did you come in contact with Bergman again, and how did the whole idea of going back and working in Swedish strike you? Was it a difficulty to act in Swedish again by that time?
No, it was a great relief, I must say. I couldn't believe that it was so easy to learn the dialogue. That was easy, and how I got to know Ingrid Bergman was that Lars Schmidt, my third husband, they were great friends since they started in the theater together. They had lunch one day in Stockholm, and I came into the hotel, and I was introduced to him, and there was an immediate sympathy between us. So we started to call each other brother and sister, because very many people think that Ingmar Bergman and Ingrid Bergman are related, but we are not. So therefore, here we were, brother and sister, and we said we must make a movie together. Well, he planned things, and he was writing, and he was going to find an original story. And then he became the director of the National Theatre in Stockholm. And I wrote him a letter congratulating him and said, it's very nice that you are now the director of the theatre, but that, of course, makes us lose this movie that we were planning. So he wrote back and he said, it's written in fire over my forehead. The picture with Ingrid shall be done. Well, years go by, and then the telephone rang, and he was there, and he said, now I have the story, and it is Autumn Sonata. So it took a long time, but if you're patient, as I said, things come around.
Ibland när jag ligger vaken om nätterna så undrar jag om jag överhuvudtaget har levat. Och då undrar jag också om det på samma sätt för alla människor. Eller om somliga människor har mer begåvning för att leva än andra. Eller om somliga människor aldrig lever, bara existerar. Och då grips jag av ångest. Jag ser en otäck bild av mig själv. Jag har aldrig blivit vuxen. Mitt ansikte och min kropp har åldrats. Jag skaffar mig minnen och erfarenheter. Innanför allt det där. Jag är inte ens född.
Now, I think it's about time we turned this over to the audience, and so could I have some questions, please? Gentleman in the middle there.
Yes. Claude Rains, oh, he was a wonderful actor. He was absolutely wonderful. He was shorter than I was, so that's what started the story about the men on boxes. Because he had to be on a box, because I was towering over him so much. And of course, nowadays we don't care if a woman is taller than the man, but in those days it was necessary. The actress had to be smaller than the actor. And so I used to look at my leading men and say, I think I'm taller than you, we better get a little box for you. Then when I came to Anastasia, I looked at Yul Brynner and I said, I'm afraid you're shorter than I am. We better get a little box for you. And he said, you think I'm going to play this whole part on a box? He said, no, he said, I'm not. I'm going to show the world what a great horse you are. Well, that made me laugh very much, and that started a nice friendship. And I overcame that complex that I had about being so tall.
Yes. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Did you know how to play the piano before playing in the Autumn Sonata?
No, and it's very funny. I played as a child. My father forced me to play the piano, you see, as a child. So I knew a little bit. I could read music and I can play, but I can play just about as well as a 12-year-old can play, because my father died then and nobody forced me to continue, so I stopped playing the piano. So I can fake it. I know where my hands should go, but it's all faked, and it's pretty well done, isn't it?
Over there.
Have you ever wished to work with Greta Garbo, who is another Swedish famous film star? And could you tell me who is supposed to be the original murderer in the Orient Express?
Oh, I don't know that. You have to ask Agatha Christie about that. I don't know who is the original murderer in that. I don't think it matters. Now, about Greta Garbo, you mean I should have worked, the two of us together? Well, nobody ever thought of a story like that. And strangely enough, when I came to Hollywood, I had done INTERMEZZO, and I was doing my second movie or third when she stopped working. She was only 35, and she just left her career, and no one knows why. She just didn't want to continue. For some strange reason, she decided she'd had enough. And so anyway, there was no one ever who thought of that.
Ms. Bergman, you mentioned you spent 3 years, I think, writing your autobiography with Owen Burgess. I wondered, was writing it a pleasant experience, an enjoyable experience, or was it merely a matter of sort of setting the record right and sort of writing it for future generations?
Well, it started out by Alan Burgess is sitting right there. And it started out by us meeting in the Inn of the Six Happiness, because Alan wrote the book and the script for that. And Alan said then, can I make a book about you? I want to write about an actress. And I said, absolutely not. And the years went by, and I always said no. And many other people have asked me, you know, and they said, you don't have to write it, we can have ghost writers and so on. And I didn't want to do it. And then came this flood of books that we have today. Everybody's writing about themselves. And you feel it's embarrassing. I mean, you say, who do they think they are? Why should we be interested? and my son suddenly said to me, but you understand, Mother, that when you're dead, everybody's going to throw themselves over your life and write about your life. And they'll take it from gossip columns, from rumors. And he said, we, your children, we can never defend you because we don't know the truth. And I thought, that's true. They will get it all from gossip. And that's when Alan called me. And I said, are you calling about the book again? And he said, oh, no. I've tried for 20 years, he said. I've given that up. And I said, now you can write it. It's an intimate book in a sense that I put dialogue in people's mouths. But I remember very well, way back. I don't remember so well yesterday, but I remember. And it's so vivid, my years in Hollywood and also my years in Italy. It was a hard experience sometimes, wasn't it, Alan? Sometimes we had, I mean, certain things are brought back that you've tried to forget and that are unpleasant, and then you have to bring them out again and talk about it again and go into letters. And great sorrow of losing one child, like I did when I left America. I understood that some letters she'd never received. So therefore I made copies and put them all away, thinking that maybe one day when she's grown up, she might like to read them. And I didn't want her to think that I had just forgotten her. And that's how all these letters are brought back into the book. And naturally that is, that hurts. But it was, we had fun too. There are many funny stories from my years of working.
Mr. Bergman, which of your films is your favorite, and when are you appearing on the London stage again?
Yes, well, the London stage again, I don't know anything about it at all. I have no plans for the future. And my favorite, you see, it's very difficult. I always have a standard answer, and that's Joan of Arc, because I so much wanted to play Joan of Arc. But it's awfully difficult to choose between Anastasia and Gaslight and Saratoga Trunk, which was another favorite of mine. And, I mean, there were so many movies, but I usually say Joan of Arc because she meant something very special to me.
There's a gentleman over there, yes.
Miss Bergman, I'd like to ask whether you have any aims or ambitions that you've not yet been able to realize during your career.
No, I don't think so. I have been very lucky. I've been extremely lucky, and I'm very grateful for that because I wanted to be an actress, and I had the chance to do it without any difficulties. I mean, you very often hear about the starving actors and going from office to office trying to get a job and start in small parts. Or, you know, I started in a part that was a good part, and from then on I always had good parts. I never had to starve. And I did television, movies and plays. And I have had no other ambitions than that. So I'm very happy.
And how well did you know Humphrey Bogart, and what was he really like?
Humphrey Bogart. I knew that question was going to come. I've answered it 1,000,000 times. Standard answer. I kissed him, but I didn't know him. No, I never knew him. He was a very private person, and he was just as upset as everybody else was during the picture, you see, because we had no script. And he stuck to his little room. If we were outdoors, he was in a trailer, and indoors he sat in his dressing room, and he didn't come out. And when he did come out, he argued with the director, and he argued with the producer and the writers, and he was very polite to me. I don't mean for a moment to say that he wasn't a nice person. But he was just as worried as I was. Which one of the two men do I love? He had the same feeling, you know, where am I going? And so he didn't say much. I mean, I never knew him privately, and outside work, I hardly ever met him again.
Miss Bergman, was there any particular female leading role that you would have liked to have played that was played by another actress?
Yes, there was, unfortunately, Garbo. She played Anna Karenina in both the silent version that I'd seen and the talk version, and she was so wonderful that when David Selznick said, I have a great idea, let's do a remake of Anna Karenina, I said, I can't do it, I just can't, because she has done it, and so when I just see her, I can't do it. So I didn't do it, and then of course I regretted that all my life, because I would have loved to have played Anna Karenina.
How much is your own life projected in the film, in your role in Autumn Sonata?
Well, a lot is my own life. I mean, it is my life. To leave my home, my children, and go on tours, or I play here in London for 6, 7, 8 months, and I stay away. They come to visit me, surely. We don't stay away from each other as much as this mother in Autumn Sonata stayed away from her children 7 years. Well, I argued a lot with Ingrid Bergman about that, because I said that is inhuman. You can't do that. But he said, we are not doing your story. We're doing... This is the story of Charlotte. She didn't want to see her children for 7 years. But, I mean, the leaving your home and your children is difficult and heartbreaking. And I was very moved in those scenes when you see Liv's little daughter, Liv and Ingmar's daughter, plays my daughter when she was small. And, you know, the mother comes, rushes up in her mink coat and kisses the child, and out the door to go on the next tour and play her piano. And the little girl is just standing there looking after her. Of course, that makes me cry, because I know my children had to do that many times.
Well, we're about coming to the end of our time, but I think we've got time for one more question. The lady at the back there.
Miss Bergman, you said which are your favourite films, but could you say which film you're happiest with your performance? Or are you never happy with it?
Yes, I think you hit on something that you're never really happy. You always look at yourself when the film picture is over and you say, well, that I could have done better, and I thought that came across, doesn't show. You know, you sit and criticize most of the time. But I can't answer that question. I don't know which one.
Well, we have about come to the end of our time. I'd like to thank Ingrid Bergman very much for coming along and talking to us so fascinatingly. And we certainly hope that there will be many more films and many more stage productions which we shall have a chance to talk about the next time she's here.